Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, an introduction of end-to-end ransomware protection through the partnership of Malwarebytes and Coalition. We will review the partnership between our two companies and we'll have an informative discussion on cybersecurity trends we expect to see in 2021. Before we get started, we wanted to review a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webinar, but if we run out of time or can't get through all of them, we will follow up with you directly afterwards. The webcast is being streamed through your computer. For the best audio quality, please make sure your computer speakers or headset are turned on and volume is up so you can hear the speakers. For the best viewing quality, we recommend using a Chrome browser window and to close programs or browser sessions running in the background that could cause bandwidth issues. If you're having any audio issues, please try refreshing your browser. We are recording today's webinar and the recording will be sent out within a few days. Let me introduce you to today's moderator, Jen McPhillips, Head of Biz Ops at Coalition. Jen, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Really looking forward to this conversation this morning between Marcin and Joshua and hearing their perspectives on why ransomware has become such a significant problem that impacts organizations of all sizes, but also more importantly, how our two companies came to partner together to offer a true end-to-end solution to protect organizations so that they can be resilient to ransomware. As Andy mentioned, we'll be taking Q&A or questions throughout the presentation, and we'll have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end. But I'm excited to first introduce our two speakers. So first, Marcin Kleczynski, who's the CEO and founder of Malwarebytes, which is a leading cybersecurity company that specializes in effective and intuitive cyber protection for businesses and consumers. Marcin's led Malwarebytes' global expansion, and he's also recognized as an expert on cyber threats, so it'll be great to hear his perspective in the conversation today. I'm also excited to introduce Joshua Motta, who's the CEO and founder of Coalition. Coalition provides cyber insurance and security to over 40,000 organizations in the US and Canada. And he was previously an executive at Cloudflare and held roles at the CIA and Microsoft. So also has a broad perspective on the cybersecurity industry. So let's kick it off. First, let's get a little bit of background on both companies and sort of how we thought about their respective solutions in the cybersecurity industry. So Coalition and Malwarebytes are both leading significant transformation across the industry. Malwarebytes by introducing proactive threat detection in what used to be more of a reactive industry. And this has obviously become so much more critical with the proliferation of ransomware. And then on the other end of the spectrum, a Coalition who is introducing comprehensive insurance, which really helps businesses survive and be able to recover financially from a cyber incident. So we'd love to hear from each of you how you got started and what led you to identifying your sort of particular opportunity in the marketplace. And Marcin, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction, Jen. And secondly, welcome to my home in what's weirdly named Sunnyvale, even though it's quite cloudy outside today. It's been a weird year, of course. So I started the company actually right at the University of Illinois, and I had a family computer that got infected with, at the time, a pretty unsophisticated threat called Bonsai Buddy. So it was a purple gorilla that would jump around your screen and try to sell you stuff. Obviously, the threats have gotten far more sophisticated since then, but I quickly realized that even a really silly threat like that bypassed traditional antivirus and didn't really know what to do. So I went online, I found a message board of people I truly to this day call superheroes. And somebody actually gave me 30 pages of instructions and said, go follow this and you'll be safe again. And my family was quite upset with me with the computer being down for so long, but I followed all 30 pages of those instructions, which led me to run tools like Hijack This and various others, and the computer was back to health. And I realized, traditional AV just wasn't cutting it anymore. So met a co-founder on the same message board, and together we started to build really a free product that would help fix threats that got past traditional antivirus. And we decided we didn't want security to be complex, ineffective, and that's how Malwarebytes got started. And today we serve both consumers and business customers.
And Joshua, I'd love to hear about the origin story of Coalition.
No, look, I absolutely love Marcin's origin story. It's very similar to ours. I'd like to think that the idea came in an epiphany, but which probably did. I think we thought about the idea overnight, but I'd been thinking about it for 25 years. So it took me a little bit longer than Marcin, but also born sort of a similar frustration, right? It's, looking back across my career, focusing on cybersecurity in a number of different areas, it kind of became clear that, while technological solutions, and particularly ones like Malwarebytes, can be, incredibly helpful, can mitigate risk, they can't eliminate them, right? And at this point, technological risk is one of the most pervasive risks that companies face. It's, an innate characteristic of our species and near species to be able to create and adopt technology. And while there's been profound benefits, and technology has, I think, transformed all of our lives for the better, there are all these new risks. So that really was the epiphany. It's like, look, this is a risk management problem. And unfortunately, most organizations today are accepting all of the risk, and without knowing it. We wanted to build a company that could really help people understand the risk they face so that they could make better decisions on how to mitigate it, which technology can, of course, do profoundly well in most instances, as well as how to transfer it, right? Because as much as you can mitigate risk, you can't eliminate it. But you can eliminate the cost of it by transferring it with a comprehensive insurance product. And that really didn't exist, to be honest. Like, while cyber insurance has been around for quite some time, it's really transformed massively in just the past handful of years, and we're obviously proud to sort of lead the charge.
So to continue on that theme of mitigating and transferring risk, I'd love to hear from each of you about how you led to discussing this opportunity to partner together, and also the value that Coalition and Malwarebytes are each able to offer to one another's customers. So Marcin, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Joshua and I met in a unrelated way. I think we were just on a random call about something else, and I realized he had a pretty cool business, and it was really an insurance company with soul. And everything we do with, at Malwarebytes has soul. We don't like working with companies that don't have that. And I thought he was doing something pretty cool, and realized there was a market fit for cyber insurance for smaller companies that just weren't getting that, and realized that our customers would see that benefit. Our customers primarily are smaller. They need easy to use solutions, and I thought Joshua's company was well fit for that and for our customer base. So very quickly, I turned that conversation into, hey, we should talk about something else. And how do we partner? What's your side of the story, Joshua?
Yeah, no, that was exactly it. I mean, it was, I recall being even more funny because I literally stare at your logo all day. Like, we were a customer of Malwarebytes even before we spoke. We still are a customer of Malwarebytes. So we absolutely use your software, and I'm still staring at your logo as we speak. So it just made perfect sense, right? It's, this was a solution that independently, like, we felt was right for our business. Incredibly easy to use. We have a vested financial interest in protecting our customers. So I love the description of an insurance company with soul. I'm from Kansas as well. Marcin and I are also both from the Midwest. There's not a ton of like famous Kansans, but one that most people recognize is Walt Disney. And something that he's attributed as saying kind of has really influenced my life as an entrepreneur. And that's Walt Disney said he doesn't make movies to make money. He makes money to make movies. And I think at Coalition, we've always seen it that way. Like, we, of course, it's a for-profit entity, but we're doing it with a very clear mission, right? Which is to solve cyber risk for our customers. And again, that means trying to obviously eliminate as many things as we can, but for us, it really means helping them survive it, remain resilient to this risk. And that's something that we do both financially and technically. And so it made obvious sense to partner with Marcin. We thought the solution could easily benefit our customers. We pass all the considerable discount and value we get like directly to our customers, and frankly, I think we're all the better for it. We're really cooperating as an ecosystem to try and solve, again, this massively pervasive problem that's affecting everyone.
Yeah, and I think one thing to consider is, as a technology provider for our customers, we can't pretend we can do it all. And Joshua, I think we talked quite a bit about this, that it is a risk mitigation problem. Any endpoint provider that says we will protect you against 100% of threats is living in the 80s, to say so myself. And one of the things that we realized very quickly is nothing can do it all, and there's got to be and even how our technology is built, that there's multiple layers. Cyber insurance is certainly one of those layers in the stack.
Yeah. And then, maybe the only thing I'd add to it is that the other really shared sense of purpose that we both had was we wanted to really democratize access to cybersecurity, right? And I think there's this perception that many businesses, particularly small businesses, don't care about cybersecurity, which it couldn't be any more wrong. I mean, from my perspective, like, if you're a small business owner, like you are deeply invested in every facet of your business. The challenge, of course, is that they can't afford to care, right? Either because it's an incredibly complex subject matter, and it's hard to be an expert when you need to be focusing and being an expert in your own business. And frankly, it's quite expensive, right? It's incredibly expensive. Most cybersecurity companies only cater to large enterprises. If you're a small business, frankly, like they don't even want to bother with you because it's not profitable. So that really resonated, right? Marcin's outlook, and certainly one we share, of really helping businesses large and small, and particularly those that are small. And that means, creating solutions that are incredibly easy, effective, which I believe we've both done, and paired together, all the better.
Absolutely, and that's the theme of today's conversation: end-to-end ransomware protection. It really does start with what mitigation on the front end, and then financial protection on the back end. So sort of great to hear both of your reflections on that partnership. One thing that happened recently was Malwarebytes disclosed in January of 2021 that they actually were implicated in a breach themselves. And it was a security incident that was caused by the same advanced threat actor that was involved with the prominent SolarWinds attacks announced at the end of last year. Marcin, if you could reflect on what happened, what Malwarebytes as an organization has learned from that event, and most importantly, what other businesses should take away from that in terms of how they should be thinking about their own cybersecurity program.
Yeah, so I've spent my entire life protecting people and businesses from a cyber attack, and in mid-December, I learned that I was suddenly on the other end of that, and that was pretty jarring. And it didn't teach me something new. It really helped me reflect on something I already knew, which is no technology can prevent it all, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so to me, it's all about reducing the blast radius, and I think we successfully did that with this specific incident. To be on the receiving end of a nation state attack that targeted some of the biggest companies in the world is terrifying. I mean, that's one way to describe it. I'm sure I could find 70 other ways, but it's sleeping with your phone, as your pillow, waiting for those calls from your team as they continue the investigation. I think the team responded really well. We worked in partnership with Microsoft. We realized very quickly that the breach was limited in scope to email only. My biggest fear, of course, was any software compromise or anything that really affected our customers. So I think the team did a really great job of responding and mitigating the damage. But it certainly was a moment in time that I think we needed the team to come together. We had certainly our options on how to disclose this to our customers, and frankly, even in conversation with Joshua and other security entrepreneurs in the space, I quickly realized that the best thing and the most important thing to do was to just go straight to our customers and say, look, here's what happened. And it was interesting. The conversations that occurred with those customers were not ones of anger or damnation, but really, hey, what did you learn, and what can you add to the story that's currently out there? And that's one of the benefits of being on the forefront of some of this stuff is we were actually able to add to the story that, hey, we didn't have SolarWinds and we were still impacted by this specific threat actor. And CISA came out and said, there's a third or more of customers that were actually impacted through other means, through other methods, including direct access to O365. So I think we're just at the beginning of this journey. I think there's more companies that will come out over time, and I think there's some takeaways that I'm sure we'll talk about as the story evolves.
Yeah, and look, I mean, on the sort of the receiving end of the news, I remember Marcin reaching out and setting up the phone conversation. Of course, at first, it's like, what's going to happen? I think fortunately we're in a good position that we're able to monitor which vendors our customers are using, and so we could quickly identify, who would have even been the possible, victims of this. such that we were prepared to be able to reach out and obviously assist with any claims. And of course, once we spoke, I was immediately relieved, and not just because of the limited nature of the issue, but even more so the transparency. I mean, like, I just have to say the whole Malwarebytes team handled it incredibly well. We're transparent to partners. We had advanced notice that it was going to happen such that we could assist. And again, it's a team effort. And what I love about our business, and which Malwarebytes really helps us with, is we have a vested financial interest in protecting all of our customers, and that's something that it's sacred for us. Like, we want to do everything humanly possible to prevent or to contain loss, and it really kind of helped us get ahead of it. Now, the incident, fortunately, after the full investigation, Marcin went through it with a tremendous amount of detail, and how they handled the incident response was just, I mean, it was great. It was very clear that it was very much limited, didn't impact Malwarebytes customers, and for us, I mean, I think we used it as really a hallmark for how vendors should behave. And frankly, we work with a lot of them, right? And our customers work with a lot of vendors, and so I think it's a great example of of what a vendor should do in this particular instant. I am fortunate to have not been on the receiving end of a nation state attack. I've tended to be more on the giving end in the past, and so I can only imagine how terrifying that would be and sympathize.
Well, Joshua, you make a really good point. I mean, we rely on so many vendors ourselves. In this case, we of course relied on Microsoft and O365, but between you and I'm sure there are 100+ vendors that we use every single day. And I think I had a quote in the Wall Street Journal on this, but it's a catch-22. The bigger vendors we use, the more targeted they are. The smaller, the less secure. So yep. It's a pretty, you have to rely on those vendors to be secure, and that's the hard part, right?
That's 100% right. And then just frankly, like the third-party risk that all organizations have today, whether they realize it or not, when you actually start to look at your company and, we have a guest.
Joshua, I told you we'd have a guest. It happens on every call, on the hour, every hour. So we're gonna send him off here and continue our conversation.
I love it. Yeah. Speaking of third-party risk, right? So, but once you start looking at it, I mean, even in Coalition, it's like there's an incredible number of vendors we work with, and it's very hard to, in any small business, right? Like when you actually get thinking about it, and there are dependencies upon dependencies upon dependencies. And look, that's something that we think a lot about in the insurance space as well. SolarWinds was, of course, a big topic of conversation, and frankly, it was interesting because a lot of it wasn't really a non-event in many respects, because fortunately it wasn't a financially destructive attack. It seemed to be more concerned around espionage, which again is obviously the great detriment of all of us involved. But it highlighted it and it helped us think about, okay, are there certain things that we would want to cover in this situation? Because in the absence of actual financial loss for customers, today most insurance products wouldn't actually respond. Outside of that.
And it's such an interesting point, thinking about the trade-off between sophistication of a vendor like a Microsoft versus someone who's smaller and maybe less targeted, but also less secure. And I think something that small businesses probably have to grapple with for every vendor decision that they make. I think sort of continuing in that theme, we talk now about the fact that cyber risk is not really a question so much of if, but when, and how severe an attack could be for an organization. And I'm curious for both of your perspective on, in light of that risk, and in light of the fact that companies of all sizes are depending on dozens and dozens of vendors for all of their normal operations, how should they think about putting in the right controls to ensure that they can limit their exposure as much as possible, but that if they are impacted, they at least have the resources to survive and be resilient? And Joshua, maybe you can kick that one off for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like the simple framework I use for thinking about like risk management problems, which it feels like we've all accepted, like this isn't strictly a technology problem. It's that you can accept risk, and ideally you do that knowingly, so you know what you've taken on and what you're responsible for. You can mitigate risk, and of course, implementing controls and protective actions, hiring folks who can do that for you, working with cybersecurity providers These are all things that can help you reduce your risk, but it's not like a linear line that goes to zero. It looks like a diminishing returns curve, right? So it starts to tail out. For every dollar you invest, for everything you do, ideally that kind of takes you down the curve, but you can't ever eliminate it. The only way to eliminate it is, of course, to transfer it, which you can do in a number of ways. Obviously, cyber insurance is one, but when it comes to third-party vendors, a lot of it is contractual as well, right? So you have to really carefully review contracts to make sure that the risks that your vendors expose, which certainly involve, data, uptime, things of this nature, like that they're responsible for those, and frankly that they are protected. So it's pretty common today for us to see vendor agreements requiring either cyber insurance or some sort of professional liability insurance, to where if that third-party vendor fails or there's some sort of inaction or negligence on their side that leads to a loss exposure for you, you have the ability to attempt to recover. And of course, by definition, anything that you haven't transferred, you have accepted. And so I remember once being on another panel where someone asked me, how many people have cyber insurance? Now they said half, not how many buy. And I said, oh, all of them do. Maybe 20 to 30% buy it, but the rest are insuring themselves. And so, it's self-insurance. If you haven't purchased it, if you haven't found a way to transfer it, to a vendor, you have it, right? And then it's just a matter of, do you have the balance sheet, so to speak, to be able to recover from it? So that's kind of the framework that I try and use when talking to most organizations, as to kind of how to think about this problem.
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about it from a technology perspective, since you did such a great job of discussing it from a kind of mitigation perspective. The one thing I'll say before that is, and I'm on various groups on Facebook and LinkedIn and such, that they learned about the news from SolarWinds and immediately went to, well, we need to leave them. And what was interesting, and again, in no defense of SolarWinds, of course there were deficiencies in the security posture there, but you have an option to leave them for a bigger vendor or a smaller vendor. And ultimately that other vendor has potentially the same risk profile as SolarWinds did in this case, and the same target on their back and the same attackers, and here we go again. All right, little guy, keep going. So to me, it's mitigating from a technology perspective. I think it's layered defense, and a lot of the breaches you've seen in the news most recently have been a deficiency in some of the best practices too. So companies that didn't have AV, didn't have it up to date, didn't have patches installed, didn't have multi-factor authentication, password. So to me, it's again, relying on these vendors, but helping to reduce the blast radius. And I think that's really what the game's all about. And Joshua, your company obviously plays a big role in this, in that when the day of reckoning comes, are you in good hands to help remediate the issues that were caused, right? For me, it's more upstream of trying to mitigate, the actual breach from happening. And again, no vendor is 100%. So layering defenses and not putting all of your eggs in one basket is where the world's been headed for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other facet of it is, like, obviously SolarWinds, headlines everywhere, but you got to remember, like, the news is by definition rare and extraordinary, or otherwise it wouldn't be news. And it kind of takes away from the things that are happening every day. Maybe one of the other reasons I was like stayed for Marcin's call was, like, we get claims every single day. There's not a single day where there is not a claim happening, and so we have visibility into these different incidents affecting companies, and certainly the vast majority, nearly all, I could even say, are not as spectacular as this one, but it's the basics. And we're actually starting to try and expose this data. We released our first claims report publicly to give visibility into, like, what's going on across this broad swath of the American economy we insure. And it turns out that most of it aren't nation state directed attacks. So again, empathy here. It's email. Like, email is involved in probably 3/4 of the claims that we see. It's the single greatest attack surface, if you will, for a company. And oftentimes they either don't have an AV solution, they haven't turned on simple controls like two-factor authentication, which is one of the most effective controls based on actual claims data that you could possibly implement in your organization. So I'm going to flog that for as long as I can. that's that's I think another kind of nuance I want to add to this. Well, the SolarWinds thing, it's quite interesting. It makes you think about third-party risk. There's just so many basic things that organizations could do, which, to be honest, like a simple one like MFA and an advanced AV solution, we would have had like 3/4 of the claims would never have been filed, right? That's sort of the state of the world.
Well, Joshua, one of the areas that we're seeing just from the endpoint perspective is RDP continues to be utilized by attackers.
Yeah, that's the other 25%.
50%, add that up and we'll get some other number. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing just a tremendous rise in the number of RDP attacks, especially as the work from home phenomenon has occurred in the last year. And these aren't sophisticated attacks in many ways. They're literally a brute force attempt on RDP, get in, start moving around the network and install some ransomware, and it's completely preventable. And most companies don't even need RDP open, and yet do. And so I think those are the kind of best practices that I think are can go a long way. But as you said, it's not linear, right? There's diminishing return at some point from a dollar and energy perspective.
That's right. I mean, the other interesting thing about RDP is, I describe it as like it's the nail that's sticking out above the surface, and that's what the attackers are looking for, because the way we look at the world is you have targets of choice, and SolarWinds was certainly a target of choice given the access it had into the organizations. Vast majority are targets of opportunity, like something very different. They're being opportunistically targeted, and I will tell you that like RDP, is the number one, and we actually have data on this. We run a sensor network, a so-called honeypot network, where we just let people scan us and attack us. And I think just this past 7 days, we were scanned over 383 million times for RDP. It's the single greatest vulnerability that we see for most organizations. And yeah, you turn it on, and all of a sudden you're now in the crosshairs of someone that you don't want to be. And like you said, there's so many other ways in which you can configure remote access, and it's particularly tragic at this time because it's being turned on to facilitate work, right? The work from home, accessing servers, and it's expedient, it's quick, it's inexpensive, especially you've already got Windows Server running, but most organizations just don't realize how much risk they've added by sticking that there, because there's someone with the hammer, the exploit, or the credential stuffing algorithms or brute force ones that's going to huff and puff and blow their way into your network. And ransomware at that point is absolutely, that's the business model du jour. I've said many times, I think the single greatest innovation in cybercrime isn't a technical one. It's a business model, and it's ransomware, and it's only getting like worse and worse and worse in terms of the things that are being held ransom, which have gone from data in your business operations to intimate personal details and exposing those. I mean, all sorts of crazy things. So, and it really comes down to a couple basic things, which again is one of the other reasons why, like when Marcia and I started talking, it's like, okay, you protect this and RDP, it's like done. Let's do this.
Yeah, just to add some specifics there to your comments about RDP and an email. From the claims report that we released earlier this year, 60% of claims were the result of email or other phishing attacks, and 29% from RDP. So you put that together, and a whopping 89% of all the claims reported to Coalition were from one of those two sources, which, to your point, when you consider how straightforward those changes are, implementing MFA and taking RDP off the internet is obviously quite significant.
Yep.
So we've obviously talked a lot about the breaches that have kicked off this year, and it's been a fast start to the year from a cybersecurity standpoint between SolarWinds and Mimecast. And I'm curious for each of your perspectives on trends that you expect to see, how you think the cybersecurity and the attack landscape is going to evolve in 2021, and how organizations should think about preparing proactively so that they can get ahead of those risks. And Marcin, I'd love if you could kick that one off.
Yeah, I think every year it's the same question. Every year it's the same answer. I think the threats are going to continue to evolve, and Work from home continues to be a phenomenon that we're all living with, and I think the attackers are looking to exploit that. So how do you protect your workers at home, I think is very pertinent. With Malwarebytes, of course, we have the benefit of also protecting home users, so we see all of the stuff that's happening in those environments. And I do think it's still a lot of the basics, but now moved into the household, which is people using personal devices that are unpatched, using software that's insecure, using credentials over and over that are both personal and workplace. So I think looking at those threats through a new lens, which we've been forced to over the last year, is really important. I talked a little bit about the RDP piece. In fact, I do feel that is a trend that will continue. Many companies just probably think they have RDP closed. They don't, and it takes just one point of entry, to get into the organization. The last thing I'll just remind everybody is, and Malwarebytes is guilty of this as well. Back on March 13th of 2020, we just left. We just left the office like an emergency, like a zombie attack. We just left the office and quickly realized that all of the machines that were there, some not joined to the domain, just sitting there, connected to the internet potentially, were vulnerable. And it really made us think about, hey, we got to go back in there. We got to make sure we've tagged everything. We've got everything secure. So remember, the office, it hasn't been powered down. It still has a server closet. It still has assets in there that may be vulnerable. And just thinking through, what can an attacker do with you out of the office for an extended period of time is something to consider. So, I think that's a lot to throw out there. But I mean, I do think those are some of the trends we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo, I mean, there's definitely an element of like more of the same. With that said, I think there are some key differences. The working from home, that's a big one. And, certainly criminal strategies are migrating to attack that. And, one other I would add beyond just sort of the remote access to the network, it's even things like social engineering. It's been especially pernicious, right? Because you have a lot of organizations that were used to accepting payment with checks, right? And now it's totally logical that you wouldn't. And so we see threat actors actively taking advantage of that. So now you see BEC, business email compromises, where they're sending an email, to the victim and saying, hey, due to COVID-19, we're no longer accepting checks. Here's our new ACH instructions. Sounds perfectly normal, particularly given the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. And wow, we have seen some very, very large, we had one not-for-profit in Florida that wired literally $1.5 million that otherwise would have been sent by a check. Didn't bother to check the instruction. It was from a legitimate email, just didn't realize that it had been compromised. Now there's a happy ending to that story, which is Coalition has its own incident response team. And we were able to recover all of the funds except for $500. We got everything out of that account. We were the first to claim it. And we made a donation of $500 to the not-for-profit because that was below their deductible. But this is happening to a lot. And it's the same thing over and over, taking advantage of the changes with COVID-19. So that's big. The new things that I think we're going to start to see, again, some of play on the old, is ransomware is getting more and more severe. Like they're all learning, criminals are learning from one another, their successes and failures. And the more severe it gets, the more money they make, right? The more they're trying to get as much leverage as they can. And, we've seen some just extraordinary things where, health clinics that have been hit by ransomware. And of course, there's the traditional extortion to give them their data back and restore their operations. But we've also then seen them attempting to extort the patients, saying that if you don't pay us, we'll release your medical records. And it's just like, I thought I'd seen it all, and it just seems to get worse and worse and worse and worse. The other one that I don't expect to see as much, but I certainly think is on the horizon, are physical cyber attacks, right? And there was some fairly, interesting news out of, I think it was Florida this past week, where a local water department had been hacked, and they'd attempted to increase the supply of a chemical that could have been deadly at that level. This is something that we at Coalition have seen coming for some time. We're the only cyber insurance policy, to my knowledge, that in the market by default, that where we offer coverage for property damage, bodily injury, and even pollution liability as the result of a computer security failure. So think of physical cyber attack. And again, that was like, as fun as a concept. We actually paid our first property damage claim in 2020. And fortunately, it was not as spectacular as centrifuges erupting in flames in Iran, but there was a manufacturer, actually in my home state of Kansas, that was blending alcoholic beverages, I think, for a number of well-known suppliers. They were making hand sanitizer during COVID, and they were hit with ransomware. Well, again, nothing spectacular, but the production shut down, and the gaskets that were in between some of the different manufacturing areas, they dried up because there was no fluid going through them, and they cracked. And so we actually paid to replace the gaskets in this factory as a result of a computer security failure, which was somewhat incredible. And that's something that I think we're going to see more of. Another big part of what we do at Coalition is we collect data on every object on the internet. And I can tell you that the industrial control systems for water companies are certainly they don't even rank in the top 10 of interesting things I've seen on the internet. Probably the most interesting, and this is a little morbid, was literally an ICS system that controls a crematorium. And it's open on the internet. You could literally change the different chambers, the temperature. I mean, it's just the things that people put on the internet. It's just a matter of time before some of these things start to happen. So again, I don't expect that to be certainly as frequent as the things we've talked about. It's going to be more of the same. But we're definitely entering into new territory now that technology literally operates basically every facet of a business's operations.
Well, Joshua, actually, on the point you made, I wrote a blog about it called COVID fatigue, and the idea that we're not actually talking to people in the office anymore. I used to be able to stand up and ask, "Did you send me that email today?" People are getting lazy about that, and that fatigue is setting in. And so I actually think cyber training is yet another element. Again, neither your business nor my business in a way, but I think becoming more relevant and more important in this kind of day and age. So
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
That crematorium story is fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the good thing is, had they been our customer, we would have notified them of this because we would have had a contact information. And we've talked a lot about RDP, which I know we all have a tendency to overuse acronyms. Remote desktop protocol. It's a feature of Windows and other operating systems that lets you remotely log in. This is actually something that we are continuously scanning our customers for. And so if that gets turned on while you have a policy with us, rest assured you will get an email from us with an explanation for why this is a high risk activity. You can connect with our security team at no cost. We can help you configure it, or configure things like Malwarebytes to secure RDP if you need to use it, things of that nature. That's something we're constantly scanning for, which again, most people don't expect their insurance companies to do. So there's a very large exercise that we have at Coalition of trying to get people to rethink what an insurance company should do for you, not just pay the claim, but actually help you prevent the loss.
Well, fascinating to hear about sort of the convergence of cyber risk moving from the digital world to the physical world, both in terms of ICS, industrial control systems, controlling physical processes, and also, Marcin, to your point, just abandoning computers in the office. And it's clear that it's no longer separate, that digital and physical is all sort of the broader specter of cyber risk. I'm going to move to audience questions. So thank you both for all the sort of thoughtful discussion there. Lots of questions, and please feel free to keep submitting those through the question feature. So first, a question for you, Marcin, about how does Malwarebytes software actually work to identify threats across a company's network and prevent them from proliferating?
Yeah, so one of the things we pride ourselves on, we're not perfect by any means, but one of the things we think we do well is address a bunch of the layers of security with a single and lightweight agent, where other companies, you need to bring in a bunch of different technologies. It's super heavy on the device. It's complicated to use. We have a cloud console that's super simple to use. We've been able to really provide all of that in a, again, single lightweight agent that's managed by the cloud. And again, one of the areas I think we've done really well in is helping kind of predict certain threats of the future and build preventative measures for that. So for example, we saw ransomware very quickly erupting and actually built a specific anti-ransomware product. More recently, we see RDP attacks on the rise. So we built a product we call brute force protection that's included in our base solution, and it monitors RDP login attempts, and if there's too many of them in a certain period of time, it actually blocks them from happening. And we've got that installed on, say, 3% of our customers' machines so far, and it's actually our highest detection. Per Joshua's point, it's one of the highest detections that we actually get across our customer base. So I think we've done a really good job of just predicting where the threat actors are moving, building technology that's super easy to use. I don't think you need an aircraft cockpit to use security. In fact, it actually is detrimental. And I think we've done a good job of solving for our customers' needs. And our customers are mostly SMB mid-market customers, so employees of 2,000, companies with employees of less than 2,000. And it's hard to build security products for people and make them simple to use. So I think we've done a good job of that.
Yeah, and in the spirit of simplicity, these products they're through our partnership. Any coalition customer can now log in to their own dashboard and get access to these. And many are available at a considerable discount. There are also premium discounts that we give on the insurance side. So it's like truly a win-win on both sides. And it's as easy as logging in and clicking a button to start getting things set up.
Great, thank you. And Marcin, I mean, considering the various trends we're just talking about sort of the evolution of the threat landscape, it's really interesting to sort of hear how you guys are trying to think ahead of where that threat landscape is moving and trying to build product towards that. So thanks for that. Joshua, I got a question in for you about cyber insurance, and specifically, how does cyber insurance actually respond in the event of an incident? And then more specifically, how does coalition cyber insurance differ from others that you would see on the marketplace?
Yeah, sure. So of course, the challenge with cyber insurance is people think of it as this one coherent thing, right? Like you can go out and buy auto insurance and it's the same policy wording, it's just which carrier you decide to work with. But that's actually not the case for cyber insurance in many lines of commercial insurance. Every policy is unique. I mean, I already mentioned, we're the only ones to cover property damage, bodily injury, pollution. There's many others that we cover. So you really have to do your diligence here and make sure you're working with an experienced insurance broker to do so. We're fortunate to work with thousands across the United States and Canada. But what does it cover? Obviously, it covers like all facets of cybercrime. And we've covered a lot of those. Everything from social engineering, which doesn't even necessarily involve a breach, right? It's just someone tricked an employee to wire funds, to really anything involving a computer security failure. And it covers both the losses that the organization experiences, so the costs that they incur, whether that's things like responding to the incident, whether it's if they're in the unfortunate position they need to make an extortion payment, lost income as the result of a business's operations going down. Any number of things. It also covers liability. So of course, we now know today that a failure on our side can actually create losses for many others. We've talked a lot about that here. And cyber insurance policies broadly cover liability to a company as the result of their own security failure, right? And so some people will ask, well, does it cover negligence? It's like, well, by definition, at some level, if security failure is negligence, it absolutely covers that. That's what it's designed to do. It also covers a lot of things that go outside of cybercrime. Covers technology failures. So if you have lost income as the result of just some other like non-security related technology failure, it will cover that. It covers privacy violations of all kinds. And that of course includes, true data breaches, hacking and whatnot. It also includes your employees accidentally emailing data to the wrong individuals, or, imagine you're a doctor and you have a patient record and it blows off in the wind. That's actually a data breach in many states. It even covers that, like no computers involved. It covers media liability for your electronic content. So in the views of the insurance companies, now that everyone has a website, you're a publisher and you're publishing things and you're using graphics and images. And if you infringe someone's graphic, you can be sued. Cyber insurance actually covers that, believe it or not. Again, nothing to do with security failures. So the way to sort of think about a great cyber insurance policy is it covers all the risk exposures, or certainly quite a few of them, that that you bring into your business by using technology, which we're all doing, right? Like, I don't think any of us could think of a single for-profit, not-for-profit, or even a religious institution that isn't dependent on a working computer and internet connection. So that's what it's designed to do. In terms of the differentiation of our own, we of course try and have more extensive coverage, thinking through what are all the things that can go wrong and how do we cover them. And so even take on the privacy side, with the advent of GDPR, the European Union regulations, now in California, the California Consumer Protection Act, companies can now be responsible, can be fined simply for failing to adhere to their privacy policy, right? Like they could not have a breach, they can have, nothing bad could have happened, but they can still be fined. So we introduced coverage to cover that as well. We'll cover, cover the costs of fines or penalties as a result of a failure to comply. So we try to be very broad, but I think where it gets very different is that, we're not your father's or your grandfather's insurance company. You should expect an insurance company to do more than just paying your claim. And frankly, insurance companies should do more than that. Like, they should help you prevent it, because no one wants to have a claim. You don't, we don't want you to have one. And that's where, we've taken a technical capability where I mentioned we gather data on the entire internet. We are at our core a technology company. Over half of the company are software engineers, and many came out of the intelligence community, such as myself. And look, we're trying to do good. We're trying to give that software to our customers, give that data to our customers at no cost, and not even out of some sense of altruism, like it's in our financial interest to try and prevent those attacks. And so all of our customers, we're continuously scanning them. We're notifying them of critical alerts that come up during the policy period. And that can even include things like malware infections, where we're actually monitoring criminal infrastructure. And if we see your computers talking to that infrastructure, we know that there's something bad inside your network. The other big difference is when you file a claim, because this isn't like an auto insurance claim where you call the fire department or whatnot to help out with something, and then the insurance company is just adjusting the loss. When our customers call us, like, the fire is typically still burning in their network, and sadly the fire department is not well equipped to put out fires inside of a network. And I think of the police showing up at your office like a scene from the Zoolander movie, where it's the guns are drawn, pointing them at your PC. It's like the criminals are inside the computer. It just doesn't work that way. And so we actually have our own dedicated incident response and forensics team that, again, is available at no cost. Don't even have to pay a deductible to use that group of people. And their entire job is to restore your operations, right? Such that then we can just pay the claim. And a big part of that too, because we both focus on small businesses, a lot of insurance products, they reimburse you, which is tough. It's because there's a lot of costs that you have to incur out of pocket when you're responding to an incident. Our policy is uniquely what they call pay on behalf. So you're never out of pocket. We will pay all of the losses, all of the bills directly. So there's never like a working capital issue, if you will, for a small business, which again, like, can be considerable after any event. So couple of points of differentiation there, just a few.
Just a few. And actually, one final question. I think this will be a good one for us to end on. We talked a lot about the various trends that we're seeing in the security landscape and the threat landscape, and also about sort of impacts for businesses across different sizes. And I'd love if each of you could weigh in on how you think about how small businesses versus mid-size versus large size should think about their overall risk management program, and how applicable insurance and security tools are depending on sort of the size of the organization.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. I mean, look, it's equally relevant for businesses of all sizes. And, I went back to saying news is by definition rare and extraordinary. But of course, we all open the news and, it's either some very large company or some political figure that's done something, right? No one ever talks about the things that are hitting small businesses every day. And, at some level, when you stop hearing about a risk, that's when you know it's truly pervasive, right? And this is absolutely impacting small businesses. I can personally attest to that as we pay out tens of millions of dollars in claims each year on these, and most of our customers are small to mid-sized businesses. So it's 100% relevant. And I think that's the same framework in many cases. Now, there's obviously complexities when you have more staff and larger networks and different, the whole different level of complexity. So there may be different solutions and different strategies, but I think by and large, there's more commonality than there is difference. Marcin's the tech person, so I'll
Well, I'll address it from a different perspective, which is I do think small, medium business and kind of even the middle enterprise are at a disadvantage compared to some of the larger organizations. Sure, maybe less of a target, but you have to understand a lot of these larger organizations spend millions, if not tens of millions, on security, have pick up the litter on their staffing. So to me, it's one of the recommendations I guess I'd give people on this call is look at managed service providers to offload some of the work. Look at vendors like Malwarebytes and Coalition that are SMB mid-market friendly and understand the needs and requirements. For example, the folks on this call likely have no idea what EDR is, endpoint detection and response. The world has changed considerably in that just traditional AV or even protection and block it all is not going to work. EDR has been in use by large enterprise for 3 or 4 years at this point. Companies like CrowdStrike do a great job of selling to those large enterprises. Well, what about businesses our size, even the size of Coalition or Malwarebytes? We're left behind. So, we've invented a way to make EDR simple, basically help you record what's happening on all of those devices, be able to roll it back. And Joshua likes that because he can bring in his team and click the rollback button and you're back to, in good shape. So to me, it's, one evolving theme is find a business that's going to work for you and fits your needs. And I think Coalition, Malwarebytes, if you're a smaller business are those kinds of companies. And then look at managed service providers to help offload some of the work. I think it could be a lot more cost effective in some of the protection that you may need.
Great. Well, I think that's a great ending point for the conversation, and just a few housekeeping things, but thank you both so much. Such an interesting conversation.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. For more information, please reach out to the teams at Malwarebytes and Coalition at the respective email addresses below. We will be sending out the recording to everyone within a few days. And at the end of the webinar, please complete the survey to note your interest in learning more about both of these companies. So thanks again and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.